will control the vertical.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery suspense anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to this episode of Anthologic Phase 1 with your host Mark. Today we're covering a series from the BBC, an anthology comedy, a dark comedy series, usually involving murder or thriller, mystery kind of stuff, called Murder Most Horrid. This was on BBC Two and appeared in 4 series, each with 6 episodes, in 1991, 94, 96 and 1999. Each episode starred Dawn French, playing a different character in each one. And she also appears to have taken the reins as the presenter, or the Rod Serling kind of figure leading you into the story. Though these appeared to be kind of absurdist. I've only watched the first one, but I get a feeling it sticks to a certain formula. And it's absurdist in the sense that we see her taking a volume from a book and then quoting it. Apparently it's often Shakespeare, and indeed in the episode we talk about from season 1, episode 1, or series 1, episode 1, she quotes Shakespeare and just says something like, Shakespeare really knew what he was talking about, even though he did it with a fluffy pen. And then, goes into the episode. So those are kind of throwaway, but they're kind of just silly sort of intros, as it were. This episode 1 is Dawn French is front and centre, and I believe she's in virtually all of them. And the title of this one is called The Case of the Missing. The Case of the Missing, It's a joke that the last word isn't there, I guess. And a lot of the titles are kind of play on typical detective or hard-boiled noir kind of titles, or kind of just in that vein, not even a play on, not even a joke about it. For example, other episodes in this series is The Girl from Ipanema, He Died a Death, Murder at Tea Time. Yeah, it's got that Agatha Christie kind of vibe. I'm looking at a few of the other ones. For example, in later series, A Severe Case of Death, A Life or Death Operation. Yeah, you kind of get the idea. Confessions of a Murderer. There we go. Dinner at Tiffany's. There you go. That's quite a nifty one. But this first one, directed by Bob Spears, who directed an awful lot of them, if not all of them. No, not all of them, but quite a lot of them. He's a kind of well-established comedy director at this point. He directed things like episodes of 40 Towers, absolutely fabulous, connected with Dawn French's Jennifer Saunders, absolutely fabulous. He also famously directed Spice World. Yes, that movie there. Also directed various older programs from the 70s, such as Are You Being Served and Dad's Army. So, yeah, he was old school and new school, considering, he spanned the sort of post-alternative comedian stuff with, like this, Dawn French. So, yeah, interesting director. And this episode, it was written by Ian Hislop, him of Private Eye fame, and Nick Newman, who did also write several episodes. And it aired on the 14th of November, 1991. In fact, the whole first season ran through just November and December of that year. They aired back to back. Whereas Series 2 was March, April 1994. Series 3, May and June 1996. Series 4, February and March, and up to April 1999. So it wasn't particularly based in one particular season of the year or even month. It just kind of was put on BBC whenever, and that's fine. And it ran for 4 seasons. It must be considered a reasonably successful series. However, having said that, I just did not find this first episode particularly funny at all. There was a couple of laughs. I can see the format. They were aping the detective story, British TV detective stories in particular, but there was a touch of the Agatha Christie's, where Dawn French gets, she plays WPC Diane Softly. Softly is a name associated with British crime stuff. There was a series on in the, I'm going to say late 60s, early 70s, called Softly, which was about a police department police detective sort of series, but much more a melodrama, I guess, or a drama than a sort of detective. And what do they call them? Procedural. There was a touch of procedural out there. Anyway, she gets promoted from traffic by the police chief to being heading of this murder case, which seems straightforward. Basically, some people in a hood in the broad daylight are kind of killing a man hanging upside down, and they're all wearing black hoods. They kill him with a trowels, and they scuttle off, once they're seen. And there's all sorts of weird, absurd, as it were, sort of clues and sort of detective are going on. Like, for example, all the witnesses of the murder all happen to win something at a brownie raffle, and they all win an open-ended holiday to the Australian outback. So they've all disappeared from the town. So there's no witnesses available, for example. And there's stuff going on. Having said that, it's got kind of a lot of comic talent involved. Stephen Frost is one of the policemen. Stephen Frost's quite good. If you know British TV from the 80s and 90s, you'll recognise him as part of the alternative comedian scene. He appeared in things like The Young Ones and stuff like that. And Blackadder. If you want a face, probably the best one is he's the sergeant that leads the firing squad in the episode of Blackadder goes forth, where Blackadder's about to be shot, and the one who gabbles, 3, 2, 1, shoot! That guy. That's Stephen Frost. He's quite distinctive. Tall fella. He's good. Also, Timothy Spall turns up as credited as pathologist. And he's the pathologist who really doesn't know what he's doing. And I find the wordplay and the jokes a bit really old-fashioned. Really old-fashioned. I mean, they're from the 40s, it feels like, rather than the 90s. So there is that. But you also get Bill Paterson, the wonderful Bill Paterson, who spans all sorts of other sort of material. Most recently, he's probably most recently seen by most viewers in Fleabag. He plays Fleabag's father. That's him. But he's wonderful, and he's all sorts of other stuff. I really enjoy him. For example, he plays like a sort of minor gangster property developer type in Our Vie de Saint Pet, particularly season 2 of Our Vie de Saint Pet. So I quite like him. And there's a few other faces you'd recognise. And it's got that old school sort of police in a small town, kind of British TV feel, deliberately. And basically, WPC, or I should say Chief Inspector or Detective Inspector, because she gets promoted softly, which is Dawn French in a blonde curly wig kind of thing, and trying to work out what's going on and not really being very good at it. And that's the kind of comedy, and it goes on. Yeah, I didn't laugh. It might appeal to some people, and it must have appealed to a lot of people because it got 4 seasons, right? Or perhaps this was a weak episode compared to the others. I don't really know. I just didn't. I had the odd smile, maybe 3 or 4 for the whole half hour. But I do remember it being distinctive from the end music, sung by Ruby Turner. Does a good turn, where she sings songs about, murder most horrid, stuff like that. And I remember that in like trailers for this when it was on the TV. That song was kind of prominent. And it was memorable, so I remembered it. as I was watching this when the show ended. Apparently the show also ends with like some sort of representation of the murder weapon that's significant in the episode. And indeed in this, trowels were the murder weapon, and we see 3 trowels, like almost as an art exhibition thing, as the camera pans around them as the song goes over the end credits. So yeah, I can't really recommend this at all. It was a bit absurdist, but like I say, some of the wordplay was really, it felt old-fashioned, a bit arch, to be honest, and just not amusing. This felt old-fashioned, I have to say. That was my feeling about it, and not particularly funny. It kind of almost verges into the comedy of the cringe, The Office or things like that. It was before that, I think. I'm not really sure. Yeah, it was before that, but it doesn't quite go far enough to really get to that. But it was a ludicrous plot, and it was intended to be a ludicrous plot. So on that score, it did what it was intended to, I believe. But there might be better episodes, but I really did not enjoy this. There's certainly better comedy and better anthology series than the 90s from the BBC than this presented, in my opinion. Right, I'm going to wind it up there. Before I go, may I ask, is anybody out there?
I'm not.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to